You ever feel like you're trying to follow the news, especially economic stuff, and it just feels dense? Like it matters, inflation, GDP, all that, but wading through it all, it can be uh, overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of drowning in information is super common.
Right.
And that's really why we do the deep dive, right?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
give us the material, the articles, the books, and we try to pull out the core nuggets, the
Yeah.
key insights to give you that understanding without you having to read stacks of paper.
Right. And today, the material you sent us is, well, it's pretty fundamental. We've got excerpts from Ludwig von Mises' big book, Human Action. Sounds academic, maybe?
It can sound that way, yeah.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's packed with ideas about why we do things, how economies work, stuff that's surprisingly relevant day to day.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. Explore these core principles Mises lays out. We're talking about human action itself, how markets calculate, maybe some critiques of other ideas too.
Exactly. We'll look at what he means by human action, then dive into economic calculation, the market process, consumer power,
Yeah.
and yeah, also his thoughts on interventionism and socialism and this link between freedom and markets.
Okay, cool. So not a dry lecture, more like us digging through these ideas together, pulling out the interesting bits. Let's jump in. Mises starts right off with human action. What's he actually getting at there?
Okay, so at its core, for Mises, human action is just purposeful behavior. We act because we feel some kind of uneasiness, some dissatisfaction, and we want to change that situation for a better one. We have ends, goals we want to achieve.
Right, trying to make things better, basically.
Exactly. But here's the key thing for economics, according to Mises.
Hmm.
It's not really concerned with what those ultimate goals are. Those are subjective, personal. You want to build a company, paint a picture. Just relax. Doesn't matter. Economics studies the means we choose to try and reach those ends.
Oh, okay. So it's about the how, not necessarily the why of the ultimate goal, even if the goal is driven by something basic like, I don't know, hunger.
Precisely. Even if the impulse is instinctual, the way you choose to satisfy that hunger involves reason. You weigh options, maybe subconsciously, like should I cook or grab takeout. That involves using means, time, money, effort towards your end.
Okay.
Mises brings up two ways our minds grasp reality: teleology and causality.
Right.
Causality is like A causes B, the stuff of natural science. Teleology is understanding things based on their purpose, their goal.
Okay, so like understanding why someone is running, but maybe they're running to catch a bus. That's teleology.
Exactly. And praxeology, which is Mises' broader term for the science of human action, with economics being its most developed part, looks at human behavior through that teleological lens. It assumes actions have meaning and purpose. It's not just stimulus response like, say, behaviorism might suggest.
Gotcha. So if we see action as purposeful, how does that change how we study economics? We can't just run experiments like in physics, right?
Right, because you're dealing with internal motivations, subjective values. You can't really use the same methods as the natural sciences. You can't, like, measure purpose in a test tube. Understanding human action requires what Mises called praxeological knowledge. It's sort of an understanding from within based on the logic of action itself.
Praxeological knowledge. That sounds a bit complex. Is that where this idea of it being a priori comes in? Something we know before experience?
Exactly. Mises argues praxeology is a priori. Its core principles aren't derived from observing countless actions, but are inherent in the very structure of how we think about action. Anytime you analyze why someone did something, you're already assuming purpose, means, ends. That whole framework.
Huh. So it's like the operating system for understanding choices.
That's a neat way to put it, yeah. It's the logical structure we use to make sense of behavior. It's not learned from observation. It's what makes observation of action meaningful in the first place.
Okay, so that's the individual actor. What about society? Is it just lots of individuals doing their own thing?
Pretty much, yeah. For Mises, society isn't some separate entity floating above individuals. It emerges from the interactions of acting individuals. Nations, markets, companies. They are all patterns arising from countless individual choices and actions aimed at achieving individual goals, often through cooperation. There's no group mind making decisions.
Right. So when historians look back, they're looking at the results of individual actions, but they often disagree, don't they, on the interpretation?
They do. And Mises suggests that while historians work to establish the facts, what actually happened, based on sources, disagreements often stem from the different theories they apply to understand those facts. They might use different non-historical sciences, different understandings of motivation or economics to interpret why things happened.
Ah, so their underlying assumptions about human action shape their story. Interesting. Okay, let's shift to the market. Mises uses this phrase, monetary calculation as the guiding star. Why is that so central?
It's absolutely crucial, especially in a complex economy with the division of labor. When people specialize, you make shoes, I grow wheat, someone else builds computers. We need a way to figure out if what we're doing makes sense economically. Money provides that common denominator.
How so?
Well, entrepreneurs use money prices to compare the costs of all the different inputs they need, labor, materials, machines, with the expected revenue they'll get from selling the final product. It's the only way to tell if a particular production process is profitable, if it's actually using scarce resources efficiently to satisfy consumer wants. Without it, you're flying blind.
So market prices aren't just random numbers, they're like information signals.
Exactly. They are real historical exchange ratios reflecting actual trades. Mises distinguishes these from final prices, which is more of a theoretical equilibrium point the market tends towards if nothing changed. But entrepreneurs act based on today's prices.
He also talks about an evenly rotating system. What's that about? Sounds unrealistic.
It is completely unrealistic, and Mises knew that. It's a theoretical construct, an imaginary world where everything repeats perfectly, no change, no uncertainty. He uses it as a mental tool, a contrast, to help isolate and understand the role of change, uncertainty, and entrepreneurship in the real dynamic market.
Ah, okay. Like a baseline to compare reality against. And what about the stationary economy? Is that different?
It's another construct, slightly different. In a stationary economy, the total wealth and income stay the same, but people's wants might still shift. Resources can move around gradually to meet those shifts without major booms or busts. It's less static than the evenly rotating system, but still helps analyze adjustment processes in a simplified way.
Got it. So the market uses these price signals to coordinate everything. Does someone force this coordination? Is there a central director?
No, not in a free market, according to Mises. That's the beauty of it, in his view. The market process itself directs individual activities towards satisfying the wants of others, all without coercion. The government's role is primarily protective, enforcing contracts, protecting property, preventing violence and fraud, setting the stage for peaceful cooperation.
Okay, so it emerges spontaneously from free choices. He talks a lot about consumer sovereignty. What's the essence of that?
It's a powerful idea. It basically means consumers are king. Through their buying decisions, choosing this, rejecting, that they ultimately determine not just the price of the final goods they buy, but indirectly the prices of all the factors of production: labor, land, capital goods.
So every time I buy coffee, I'm sending a signal back up the chain.
You got it.
Yeah.
Every dollar spent is like casting a vote in an ongoing economic election, influencing what gets produced, how much, and by whom. Businesses constantly have to cater to those consumer preferences to stay afloat.
And this connects to profit and loss, right? How do they fit in?
Absolutely. Profit and loss are the direct result of how well entrepreneurs anticipate those future consumer demands. If you guess right about what people will want and produce it efficiently, you earn a profit. That profit signals you used resources well.
And if you guess wrong,
You suffer a loss. That loss signals resources were wasted, used in a way consumers didn't value sufficiently. So profit isn't just greed, it's a crucial indicator of economic progress, showing value creation. Loss is a painful but necessary signal to change course.
how do businesses actually track this, especially complex ones?
That's where double-entry bookkeeping comes in. It's not just accounting. Mises saw it as a vital tool of economic calculation. It lets entrepreneurs break down their business, see which parts are profitable and which are losing money, and make rational decisions about allocating capital.
Makes sense. He contrasts this profit-driven approach with bureaucratic management. What's the difference?
The core difference is the guiding principle. Entrepreneurial management is driven by the bottom line: profit and loss. Bureaucratic management, typically found in government or nonprofits, operates based on following rules, procedures, fulfilling assigned duties, the service principle. There isn't that direct feedback mechanism of market prices and profitability.
So it's necessary for things the government does, but not suited for producing goods and services in a competitive market.
That's Mises' argument, yes. Because without the profit and loss test, it's very difficult for a bureaucracy to know if it's operating efficiently or truly meeting needs in the most cost-effective way.
Okay. And ultimately, these market prices, where do they originate? Are they objective?
They originate from the subjective value judgments of every individual participating in the market. How much you value a loaf of bread versus how much I do, interacting with how much bakers value their time and ingredients. Prices are social phenomena emerging from that interplay of countless subjective valuations through supply and demand.
Right, okay. So we've covered action, calculation, the market. Now, the outline mentions Mises critiquing other economic ideas, like Marxism. What was his issue there?
Mises fundamentally rejected the Marxist idea that a person's reasoning is determined by their social class. Marx claimed that thinking just reflects class interest, creating ideology rather than objective truth.
So a bourgeois economist could only ever think bourgeois thoughts, basically.
That's the gist of the Marxist critique, yeah. Mises saw this as denying the possibility of universally valid scientific knowledge, including economics. He also heavily criticized the Marxist idea of historical inevitability that capitalism must collapse into socialism through some dialectic. Mises viewed this as mystical assertion, not scientific proof.
He didn't buy the idea that history was pre-programmed towards socialism.
Not at all. He pointed out that even Marx admitted conflicts within classes, undermining the idea of a perfectly unified class interest driving history.
So what was Mises' alternative view on reason?
He argued that the basic logical structure of human thought and action is universal, not class-bound. It's the foundation for all knowledge and is adequate for understanding reality. And critically, praxeology and economics are, or should be, value neutral. They analyze the suitability of means to achieve given ends without judging the ends themselves.
So economics can tell you if a policy is likely to achieve its stated goal, but not whether that goal is good.
Exactly. It focuses on the logical consistency and consequences of actions relative to aims.
Okay. The outline also brings up time preference. What's that about?
Time preference is fundamental. It's the simple observation that people generally prefer satisfaction sooner rather than later. A good available today is usually valued more highly than the exact same good available only next year.
Because, well,
Right.
today's better than tomorrow.
Pretty much. This preference for present over future goods is why interest rates exist. It influences saving and investment. And crucially, Mises stresses that economic calculation is always forward-looking. We make decisions based on expected future benefits, not based on how much labor or cost went into something in the past. Past costs are sunk.
Right. What's done is done. Look ahead. What about class probability versus case probability?
That's an interesting distinction. Class probability is statistical. It's about the frequency of outcomes in a large group of similar instances, like insurance companies know the probability of a house fire within a large pool of houses.
Okay, based on past data for the whole group.
Right. Case probability is different. It applies to unique individual events where we know some of the influencing factors, but not all, like trying to predict the success of one specific new business venture. You can analyze its unique situation, but you can't assign a precise numerical probability like you can with dice rolls or insurance statistics.
Because individual choices and unique circumstances are involved?
Exactly. Mises cautioned against misapplying statistical classically probability to unique entrepreneurial case situations.
Got it. Okay, moving towards the end here. Interventionism and socialism. Mises clearly wasn't a fan of central planning. Define interventionism first.
Interventionism, for Mises, is when the government interferes with specific aspects of the market without going full socialist. Think price controls, subsidies, minimum wages, tariffs. It's trying to steer the market outcome. Socialism, of course, is the complete government ownership and control of the means of production factories, farms, resources.
And the socialist dream was that central planners could run everything more rationally, right?
That was the claim, yeah. That omniscient planners could allocate resources better than the anarchy of the market.
But Mises' big objection was
The calculation problem. We touched on it earlier. Without private ownership of the means of production, there are no genuine market prices for capital goods, for resources, for factories. Without those prices, planners have no way to calculate rationally.
no way to know if using steel for bridges is better than using it for railways in terms of satisfying actual needs efficiently.
Precisely. How do you compare alternatives? How do you know if a project is wasting resources or creating value? You can't add up engineering specs in different units. You need common monetary prices reflecting relative scarcities and consumer valuations. Without them, it's chaos, or just guessing based on arbitrary decisions. Building that house becomes impossible to plan rationally.
What about attempts at market socialism, where state firms sort of trade with each other?
Mises argued that's just plain market. If there's no real private ownership, no real possibility of bankruptcy for inefficient state firms, no genuine profit motive driving risk-taking investment, then prices are artificial. They don't convey the real information needed for economic calculation. It doesn't solve the fundamental problem.
Okay, so central planning has that calculation problem. What about interventionism, those specific interferences in the market?
Mises argued they're also problematic, often creating unintended consequences that are worse than the original issue they tried to solve. Interventions distort the market's price signals.
Like price controls. If you cap the price of bread.
Yeah. If you set the price below the market level, you get shortages. More people want bread at the low price, but bakers have less incentive to produce it, or maybe can't even cover their costs. So you get queues, black markets, misallocation. The intervention nullifies the market's function in that area.
And minimum wage laws.
His argument was similar. If you mandate a wage above the market clearing level for certain types of labor, employers might hire fewer people because the cost exceeds the value those workers add, leading to unemployment, especially for lower-skilled workers. The intention might be good, but the outcome, he argued, is often harmful to those it's meant to help.
He also mentioned government messing with money, historically.
Right. Things like debasing coins, reducing the gold or silver content, or trying to fix the exchange rate between gold and silver, bimetallism. Mises saw these as interventions that disrupted trade, created uncertainty, and ultimately failed, often causing inflation or other economic woes. Okay, so a consistent theme of interventions distorting the market's coordination mechanism. This brings us to the final area, freedom and the market. How did Mises connect these? For Mises, freedom, in a social context, primarily meant freedom from arbitrary government coercion. The government's legitimate role is limited to protecting individuals and their property from aggression, allowing for peaceful cooperation. A market economy is the economic system of free individuals making voluntary choices.
So economic freedom, choosing what to buy, sell, produce, is a core part of liberty.
Absolutely. He contrasted this with a hegemonic system where rulers just issue commands. The market, with consumer sovereignty, is a kind of continuous democracy where every penny spent is a vote guiding production. It empowers individuals.
What about the criticism that markets create economic power for big companies, which is also a form of coercion?
Mises strongly disagreed with equating market success with governmental coercion. A successful business gets power only by pleasing consumers better than competitors. Consumers always have the ultimate power to switch their vote, their spending elsewhere. True coercion, for Mises, involves the threat or use of physical force, which is the state's domain, not the market's, unless the state grants monopolies or special privileges.
And the idea of conflict between rich and poor in a market.
He emphasized the harmony of interests in the long run in a free market. People pursuing their own goals through voluntary exchange generally benefit each other. Entrepreneurs succeed by serving consumers. Workers earn wages based on the value consumers place on what they help produce. While temporary conflicts or competition exist, the overall framework promotes cooperation and mutual benefit, unlike a zero-sum game.
Wow, okay, we've covered a huge amount of ground there. From the very nature of action, through calculation, consumer power, critiques, interventions, and freedom. If you had to boil it down, what are the absolute key takeaways from this dive into Mises?
Gosh, okay. Key things. 1. Human action is purposeful, aiming to improve things. 2. Economic calculation using market prices is essential for rational resource use in a complex economy. 3. Consumers rule, their choices drive everything. 4. Interventions often backfire by distorting market signals. And 5. Economic freedom and personal liberty are deeply linked.
Right. Understanding those really does give you a different framework for looking at economic news and debates. Okay, so for you, the learner, listening in, here's something to chew on. How could you apply these ideas of, say, economic calculation weighing means and ends, costs and benefits to decisions in your own life, even ones that aren't strictly financial? Or maybe think about a current economic policy debate. How might Mises' perspective on human action and market processes give you a different angle on it?
Yeah, definitely food for thought. We hope digging into these ideas was useful. Keep exploring, keep questioning. We're looking forward to the next deep dive based on whatever sources you send our way next time. Thanks for tuning in.